and welcome to a slightly delayed, but nevertheless we are here, Quaran-Stream. I am your Raw head of sport, Raw 12:21 AM's head of sport, Josh Sim, and thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon where there is a bunch of football going on, and we'll talk about sort of the games that are going on at the moment in just a bit, and as well as going over some of the games from the international break as well, and previewing some of the games this weekend and also in the Champions League, and there's been a little bit of news to go over as well. So that's the plan. As always, in the video description are social media links, so feel free to follow on all of them. We have the Raw Sport Weekly from last Wednesday as well, an F1 special, which one of my guests was on. We pretty much analysed to death the Turkish Grand Prix, went over the Bahrain Grand Prix, which is happening not this weekend, next weekend. So if you are a big F1 fan, check that out. It was a fun show to have as well. So without further ado, I will bring on my guests. So first of all, someone who's probably as sleep deprived as I am, but we'll see how he goes. It's Joe Spagnoli.
I am as sleep deprived as you, but I certainly don't sound as sleep deprived as you. Jesus Christ, Josh. Full disclosure for the people watching this, if there are any of you. I went on Facebook about 20 minutes before right now, messaging Josh, asking what was going on with the stream. It said he hadn't been active for 9 hours. I thought there was a good chance he'd been killed in the time waiting for the Quaran-Stream, but no, he just completely lost track of time. So professional streaming as per usual, Josh.
You know what? This is my hangover acting skills, if I had to act like I was hungover, but actually have not.
So, have you ever seen there's like the Cornetto trilogy, the last film, The World's End? They go to 12 different pubs. Apparently there's like 12 different stages of drunk acting. I reckon you're already at 5 or 6 right now.
Oh, great. Thank you for that. And moving on to someone who's probably the freshest faced of the three of us and probably one of the most energy, it's Ben Parkinson as well.
Yeah, afternoon Josh, afternoon Joe. Yeah, not sleep deprived, so I'll try and be lively, bring some energy.
The energy is definitely going to be needed for this one. A couple of live results going on at the moment that we should talk about. Well, we should just let you know. Brighton lead Aston Villa 1-0 thanks to Danny Welbeck's goal 12 minutes ago. So Brighton lead against a high-flying Aston Villa side. In the Bundesliga, some noteworthy results. Bayern Munich got 1-0 down against Werder Bremen. Maxi Eggestein has scored on the stroke of half-time. Gladbach lead Augsburg 1-0 thanks to Florian Neuhaus. Similarly, Leverkusen lead Arminia Bielefeld 1-0 thanks to Leon Bailey. Having a look at the other scores at the moment, Lazio lead Crotone 2-0 thanks to Immobile and Correa's goals. Real Madrid lead Villarreal 1-0 thanks to Mariano. And I think that's it. I'm trying to find the championship. But my they're all scrolled.
Yeah.
Are they all just kicking off? Okay.
Well, they kicked off half an hour ago.
Just saw Lecce 7-1 up in Serie B, which is quite a scoreline.
Yeah, over one of my favourite teams, Reggiana. Thanks for reminding me, Josh.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. I have got the championship now, I think. If this thing holds up.
There are 10 championship games live right now.
Yes.
Why are they able to play the championship games at 3 p.m. on a Saturday so we can do Super Saturday and not the Premier League games?
Your guess is as good as mine, Joe.
Why?
Your guess is as good as mine. Huddersfield lead Stoke 1-0. Watford lead QPR 1-0 as well. Preston are goalless against Sheffield Wednesday, who are down to 10 men. The other games are all goalless apart from that. So there we go. We will let you know as games come through, the results of those games. Let's start quickly with the international break. Again, it came and went. It felt like a really long few weeks, so it's good to have. It felt so, there was plenty of action to analyze, as Ben and I did some of it last week. As expected, Ben, or was it as expected for England? They lost to Belgium and then beat Iceland. Was that sort of where you thought they would fall coming into this week?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think I was a little bit more hopeful going into the game with Belgium, but I think it really just showed how England aren't quite at that same level. They don't have the same level of ruthlessness that Belgium and Spain and all those other teams have. So I think apart from really Jack Grealish's creativity, not much to take from that game. But, Belgium were more class. I think, that they didn't actually have... I think England actually had more shots, but it was just Belgium taking their chances and creating more clear-cut chances than England. So I think, it was a bit of a reality check for England, just making sure that, we know we're not quite at that world-class level yet. We can't expect anything big from these big games. Hopefully they'll be able to take it and learn from it coming to the Euros.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Jack Grealish. It seems like the nation's sort of fallen in love with Jack Grealish over the last week in terms of making him, he's been hailed probably the nailed-on starter of this England team, one of the best England players at the moment. Joe, how much of this is this overblown, or is this right that Jack Grealish is now seen as one of the best players in this country? Is it the fact that maybe he benefits from not being one of the big six clubs, so there's no kind of partisanship with the fans? Is it, or does his skill set truly as unique and deserves a ton of praise as a result?
I mean, I think by comparison to the other players that would be fighting for that position, arguably that Phil Foden, who, to be fair, had an amazing game against Iceland, 2 goals after the 80th minute, and Mason Mount, who for me has never been as good out wide as people seem to claim he is. Jack Grealish has that skill set far more nailed down than the other two. Jack Grealish can easily play out left midfield, left wing. It's good down the middle, good off the striker. And in this game where England were the game against Iceland, where England were playing effectively a 3 at the back with wing backs and using inside forwards, Jack Grealish did look very, very impressive. In terms of partisanship with the fans, I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference. I've seen a lot of people criticising Jack Grealish's attitude either way. But, it's one thing to praise a good run of form, and there's no question that Jack Grealish is on that with a high-flying Aston Villa at the moment. But he seems to be keeping it going a lot more than what we've seen these so-called good runs of form from international players over the last few years. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jack Grealish managed to find a way into the England starting 11, especially if, for whatever reason, Gareth Southgate was to stick with this 3 at the back formation. It's just a shame, I guess, that England have failed to make it to the Nations League finals, where we could actually see this formation and indeed some of these alternative lineup choices used in proper competitive games in a major competition, as opposed to just a qualifying phase.
Yeah, that's very true. And we won't know. I mean, I think the next international break is in March, so it's a long Gareth Southgate to kind of get another look at his players. And obviously with the Euros coming up in the summer, then after, time is running out, I guess, for him to kind of have his players all together in a camp and sort of work out who makes the squad and who doesn't. We mentioned Jack Grealish. Ben, was there anyone else? I mean, was there anyone else that stood out to you throughout the week from an England standpoint? Obviously, Joe mentioned Phil Foden had a very good week. We obviously had, he made one appearance against Ireland, but Jude Bellingham obviously was a big talking point heading into this week. Is there anyone? We talked about the problems that England faced in the back, and specifically towards centre back as well, and their midfield. Did anyone kind of stand out and stake a claim, or are we still kind of undecided on where we lie with these issues?
I think central defence still remains a problem. Eric Dyer, I'm not a fan of at the back at all. I think he's incredibly unconvincing. Every time I see him play, he makes a mistake. Some passes he was trying to play were absolutely ridiculous. So I think he should be nowhere near that squad, let alone the starting lineup. I actually was impressed with Bukayo Saka. I think from more of a formational point of view, in the sense that I think playing with a left-footed left wing back or left back just provides so much more balance for that England team, and it just seems so much more natural. It allows those inside forwards to really press inside, keeping the wing backs wide. And I think in the Iceland game that showed, a great partnership down that left-hand side between Jack Grealish and Saka. So I think that impressed me. But yeah, these central defensive issues, I think they're going to keep on happening. I just think we don't really have that leader at the back. Harry Maguire did play really well against Iceland. He actually played very high up the pitch, but it's Iceland. There's only so far you can really give praise against Iceland. So I think, those issues are still there, but I can't see between now and then how we're really going to fix that. I think it is just a weakness for us. So, if our defense is looking shaky, then we're just going to have to score more and create more than the opposition.
Yeah, it does appear that England are very attacking heavy with their options at the moment compared to it being in the back, albeit not right back, because right back there seems to be 20 right backs that could play for England at the moment. I mean, there's not a whole lot to add really. It's a difficult. I mean, it is quite difficult to read in, Joe, to read where England are. I guess when you have two games against two very different opposition, and one obviously, and also, I guess, expected results as well. It's very hard to see where England are. But when you look across the continent, I mean, you look at Germany losing 6-0 against Spain. That was a bit of a shocker. Granted, Italy had looked quite rejuvenated under Roberto Mancini. But then the Dutch under Frank de Boer, that's a bit of a question mark given his managerial experiences of the last years or so. And I mean, I guess you'd have France as the front runner given their talented depth of their squad. But where do England lie for you? I guess in the footballing landscape in terms of internationals.
You see, I think it's probably due to COVID circumstances and the fact that as I'll probably talk about when we get onto the club situation later, the fact we've basically got a double injury crisis throughout this year, extra fixture congestion due to COVID, and indeed just COVID itself forcing players into isolation. So it's very difficult to actually get a bead on how good a club team is at the moment, let alone a nation. For me, England aren't necessarily looking better after this run of qualifiers than they did before. I'd hesitate to say that they look worse. As Ben said, I think the defensive issues are far more due to do with personnel as opposed to Gareth Southgate's system. He just doesn't have that many players to pick from. And even the options from last year that he arguably should have been picking at centre-back, say Chris Smalling and Fikayo Tomori, are either injured or not looking so good at the moment. So even relative to last year, the defensive player pool has absolutely shrunk. I would say, I would have said a few months ago that Italy, Spain, Belgium, maybe even Germany were still ahead of England at the moment. I don't know what to say about Germany because I actually haven't seen the highlights against Spain. But at the moment, I'd say all of these other nations are still just about ahead of England by some extent. Although, again, it's really unreliable that like the Nations League, although I love it, you don't get much of a bead on how well the teams are doing because obviously they're only playing 3 different countries in a series of 6 games. All I will say is one country that could suffer and benefit England as a result is the Netherlands. I actually said a few months ago on Raw Sport when we thought the Euros were going to be this summer, I had the Netherlands down to win the whole thing in an upset. Under Frank de Boer, I absolutely do not see that being the case. I think even in terms of management, Gareth Southgate is significantly ahead of Frank de Boer. And it's not like the Netherlands look entirely secure in the defensive area either, despite their very good personnel. So actually, England, I'd say higher than you might expect of me, but by no means a European powerhouse yet.
Yeah, and add to that the Virgil van Dijk injury, and we don't know if he'd be back in time for the Euros. Then yes, the Dutch look a bit suspect. Yeah, as for Spain, Germany, I have plenty to say, but I'll keep it short. Basically, Joachim Löw is in a bit of trouble. He is definitely in a bit of trouble. And Germany are in a weird spot because they've chosen not to call up Thomas Muller, Jerome Boateng, and yeah, I think those two primarily for these kind of footballing. For Germany anymore, they don't call those two up anymore, and that is becoming a bit of an issue because those two are among the stars of what's arguably the best footballing club in the world. And so when you're not haven't decided to call them up, then there's a bit of an issue as to why. So yeah, Germany are in a bit of strife at the moment, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens from here, and if there is going to be changes managerial wise and backroom wise as well. So that's me just having a personal, not rant, just giving off my personal thoughts about it. So moving on, I feel like there has been a fair bit of news. I'm just going to check the scores to see if anything has happened since. I don't believe so in terms of the Brighton Villa game. So Ryan Sessegnon has scored for Hoffenheim, though, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, the England left back on loan at Hoffenheim. So that's exciting for Spurs fans, I guess. But let's talk a bit of news. And I don't know if this was a surprise or not, but I guess the big one was Pep Guardiola has signed a new 2-year deal to stay at Manchester City. That will be until, I believe, 2023. I believe his deal was set to expire in 2021. So 2023. It was interesting. Guillaume Balaguer, Spanish football reporter, said he had offers from PSG and Juventus, apparently, but he chose to stick with Man City. Ben, when I read out that he apparently had approaches from those two teams, and then you compared it to Manchester City, did he make the right decision in terms of sticking with the Manchester City project above those other teams?
I think time will tell whether it's the right decision. I think, right now, we've talked about City. They've really not started the season great. I think really the romantics of football almost want him to return to Barcelona and be that man who sorts it all out. But I think, he wants to win the Champions League. He wants to be the man to do it for City. And he also wants to win a Champions League for himself without Lionel Messi to almost prove himself. I think, he wants to maybe not shy away from the project, not shy away from this almost small transitional stage. I'm sure now he's staying for another 2 years. He's going to have problems with Sergio Aguero maybe getting on. They're going to have to potentially purchase another striker, maybe another couple of midfielders, probably a left back. There's still, City are going to go big spending again, and I wouldn't call it a rebuild, but I'd call it slight kind of tweaking of a couple of players they've got. So I think it is potentially a good decision, but only time will tell. I think another positive for Manchester City fans is that I feel like this will definitely help move Kevin De Bruyne signing a new deal over the line. I think obviously they have a great relationship, and I think being able to tie Kevin De Bruyne down for the next 3 or 4 years will definitely be integral to City's success. So I think when you look at that, I think it's definitely really positive for Man City fans, but I'd imagine Pep Guardiola will probably do this next couple of years, and after that, what happens, he'll probably take a break as he normally does, and then we'll see what the next project is for him.
Yeah, Joe. I mean, same question really. Was this? Do you feel like this will be the right decision from Pep? Obviously, again, as you said, long-term wise, we can't really project into the future what it's going to look like. But when you look at Manchester City right now and where they are, is Pep Guardiola the man to, I guess, do a mini rebuild of sorts, but also kind of keep them very competitive across the many trophies that they compete for?
It's so ridiculous, isn't it? We're talking about a mini rebuild or a complete rejigging of the team for a team that's been the highest spending net spending club in football for the last 10 years. It seems that no matter how much Man City seem to spend and how many players they bring in, the squad is just never finished. And as you say, they have had a really bad start to the season, relatively speaking. I mean, I actually hadn't seen the news that this had been confirmed. It seems to have happened very, very quickly, at least in terms of the media coverage. I'd seen that he was in talks for a new 2-year deal, but it seems to have been signed off very, very quickly. In terms of the other clubs that were interested, PSG and Juventus, yeah, they're the two you'd expect. Looking at club form in the last few years, Manchester City is probably the team that is the hardest to win the Champions League with, at least judging from results in the last few years. Whether or not that is Pep's management in the Champions League is quite frankly a debate for another piece to Mike, but I am somewhat surprised. I understand, obviously, the point about De Bruyne is completely correct. I think if you have any aspirations of winning the Champions League with Manchester City, Kevin De Bruyne is the absolute MVP of the team. You need to keep him around no matter what. And if that means keeping Pep Guardiola, fine, because it's not like there are too many City-ready coaches available at the moment. Maybe you'd argue Pochettino, but as far as I can tell, Manchester United are sniffing around that particular hole already. So I don't know. I would have expected him to have had more of an interest towards Juventus. Maybe they're putting a bit more backing behind Andrea Pirlo, who's had a difficult start. They've certainly, for me, got a much better shot of winning the Champions League in the next couple of years. But yeah, I feel like the Manchester City project, and maybe this is part of the reason why, despite the criticism of Guardiola, they've stuck with him, is that they have invested so heavily under Pep Guardiola. They've invested so heavily in terms of the coaching staff they've brought in, the medical staff they've brought in, the philosophy of play, which has been ingrained for 4 seasons now. To move on from him in the short term, at least, would cause even more damage. And especially considering the way the Premier League season's gone right now, it might actually make it impossible for Manchester City to qualify for the Champions League if they were to bring in someone completely new. They're already a long way down the table, but they're hoping, and I would argue sensibly so, that Guardiola is going to be able to pull them into that top 4. So yeah, for me, it makes an awful lot of sense. However, they do say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. And in terms of ridiculous overspending and failing in the Champions League, yeah, I don't see that changing in the short term for Manchester City.
Yeah, of course, he was asked about, what was the possibility of Lionel Messi coming to Manchester City, and he replied he's a Barcelona fan. He wants to see Messi finish at Barcelona. So I think we can put those rumors to bed, at least for now. I do think give it 6 months and I feel like they'll start heating up again. But this, as you said, Ben, this Manchester City team, what changes do you feel? I mean, you alluded to Aguero he is starting to get a little older now. Is that one of the biggest changes that needs to be made to this Man City team when you kind of look at the squad as a whole? Do you perceive Ruben Dias and Laporte being the centre-back pairing that he'll have going forward? Because we know that was a problem spot as well with, John Stones has not had a great time of it. Obviously, he moved Fernandinho back to help fix some of it. What are the sort of issues that you see that he needs to kind of resolve throughout his next couple of years?
I think Sergio Aguero is a bit of a dilemma because I think he's such an amazing striker, and we all want to see him play, but he's not playing. He does struggle with injuries. And then I think the question is Gabriel Jesus that man? Is he good enough to play to the high level when Aguero is not available? And I'm unconvinced. And I think, you have players like Lautaro Martinez and, Haaland potentially coming available. So, do they want to maybe enter the market this summer to get those players? And then, so they can replace Aguero in the next, even if it's not straight away, in the next couple of years. So I think it's definitely something I think they're going to look at. Centre back, I think we need to give it a little bit more time. I struggle to separate here. Is it a tactical issue, or is it the actual centre backs in place? Because I know a couple of years ago they had a fantastic defence, but was that just because the rest of the league wasn't threatening enough? Now I think in this league, there's a lot of defences that are exposed, and it's not necessarily because defensive football is like the defenders are bad. I think just defensive football isn't really being coached to a high enough standard at the moment. So I think we need to really wait and see what happens with the City defence. But obviously we know Laporte has his injury troubles. So, I think, again, it's probably going to be somewhere they might have to dip into the market to. Left back, they need to sign a left back. And, it sounds weird saying it's just a normal left back, someone who is left-footed, someone whose actual position is a left back, just to provide that balance to the team. I thought they should have gone in the market for Ben Chilwell in the summer because, Angelino, Pep's clearly not keen on him. And, realistically, he's not really a defender. He's just kind of a very attacking left back. Mendy hasn't been good enough. Zinchenko, it's not his natural position. So, and same with Ake. So I think that they really need to dip in the market for a left back. It's not so much of a rebuild, but I think it's just tweaking a few positions because, you look at their team and Liverpool's, and you still just think like if Liverpool have everyone fit, Liverpool are miles ahead of City. But how can that be? Like Joe said, when City have spent all that money? So, at least Pep Guardiola knows he's going to be backed as Manchester City manager because he's been backed every single season. So, I won't be surprised when they break some transfer records next summer. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, City definitely going to need a few tweaks.
Yes, that they will. And it will be, as you said, they have been linked with the likes of Lautaro Martinez, another striker, I guess, with Aguero's with the Aguero issue kind of looming at least. It'll be very interesting to see what they invest in going forward. And where they'll be, at least for the moment, and in terms of their status, I guess, going forward in terms of the Champions League and the Premier League as well. So interesting stuff. I don't really know. I mean, Joe, was there? Do you see a replacement out there that could have stepped into the City job, like a Pochettino or a Allegri? Do you think one of them would have been interested anyway, or do you reckon for their perspective, keeping Pep was the right move?
I mean, it's further to what I said earlier. I think they're so far down that particular Pep Guardiola rabbit hole in terms of how they build the squad, in terms of principles of play, that any manager, even Pochettino, would have been such a change for them that in the short term, I think it would have done more damage to their league performance. We'll see, I think, in the wake of this international break, just where Manchester City really are. Again, I know the Premier League's a bit crazy at the moment, but I feel like this early in the season, you can't extrapolate too much from what the table's saying anyway. We've still got a long way to go before positions in the trends in the table look reliable, let alone finishing positions. So no, I can completely understand why they've gone for Pep Guardiola. I can't even imagine he earns that much more than some of the other options that were being thrown around. And although I love Max Allegri in particular, he would not fit at Manchester City. So again, it's a case of sticking with Pep, again, as Ben says, making these tweaks. But again, how expensive are these tweaks going to be? There are a lot of clubs that make tweaks for about €2 million. How much are Manchester City going to spend next summer? Realistically, looking at the amount of players they need to bring in or replace, we're talking £150 million minimum. Yeah,
it's going to be a hefty spending bill, but I feel like City they'll be all right in doing so. And at least I don't think they'd have to sell either. I don't think they're under the buy to sell policy as many other teams are.
They've never been able to sell players well. They players asked to leave. The club, the buying club will offer a derisory amount, and City will go, no, we want triple that, and then the other club will go, no. And like, all right, fine, have them then. How they get away with FFP, I've got no idea.
I mean, I'm trying to remember how much they sold Leroy Sané for, but I believe that was way below market value. I feel like they could have got a lot more for Leroy Sané, and even Jerome Boateng back in the day when they sold him as well. Yeah. I feel like
not to make it about my club, but they were demanding 30 million for Edin Dzeko. They sold him for 11 million pounds. That's ridiculous for a player that more or less won them the league on that final day.
Yeah, Sané was for 45 million initially euros, rising to possibly 60. Which, if you think about, and I'm not comparing Leroy Sané to Jadon Sancho by any means, but if Sancho costs 100 and Sané costs 60, and Sané is obviously a little bit older, but has obviously proven himself as well. It's interesting how the gap's so high between the price tags of those two players. I mean, moving on to, I picked the story because it was just a very interesting thing for Jose Mourinho to say, as he is a very interesting man to kind of follow. It's obviously a year since he took the Spurs job, and he obviously, as club managers are, very concerned with how the international break has impacted players, whether it's, COVID positive, players getting COVID wherever they are in the world, whether it's injuries, and we'll talk about how bad it's sort of kind of mushroomed up to be. But he was of the mindset that Gareth Southgate needs to name the coaches that put pressure on him to not select players, which is really, it's quite interesting because you'd think his name would be up there. But is he right? It's a tough spot, isn't it? Because Southgate needs to pick his best team and needs to work out who his best players are. But at the same time, you can understand, especially with this really congested season, club managers are right to be concerned about how their players are being used throughout this break as well.
Yeah, no, it is a really tough spot because, what can Gareth Southgate do? All Gareth Southgate does is select the players. He doesn't organise the fixture list, so it's a real tough one. But I think it just stresses the need for just leadership to be taken over this fixture list. Like, they need someone to sit down and, figure things out and just talk. And I think is you hear about Jose Mourinho talking about it. You hear about Gareth Southgate talking about it. Where's the players saying all of this? They're the ones whose mental and physical well-being are being affected by this congested fixture list, by international games. So they are the ones who need to have a say because it involves them primarily and their physical and mental well-being. And, we need to protect that. Whilst there's loads of games for fans, which is brilliant, we want to see the best players play. And right now, I have no idea who is and who isn't injured. I genuinely don't know because there is that many people I've seen have a knock or they have a long-term injury. And it's just, it's getting excessive now. So it just really stresses that some leadership needs to be taken over this. It is a bit unrealistic for Jose to think that Gareth Southgate would name and shame because I don't think that will happen. But I see both sides. It's incredibly frustrating, as a manager as a club manager, when you have the pressure to win all those games and then your best players go on international duty and get injured. But then again, it's not Gareth Southgate's fault. So I think, he wants to select the best players for the country. He needs to win manager games. So there's a massive conflict of interests there. And it's neither of them fault. So it's just a bit of a mess really. And I just think someone needs to really get a grip of the situation, sit down and talk to the actual players to find out what's best to do.
Yeah, it's not an easy kind of decision to think about. But Joe, to put it bluntly, should we even be playing international games at this point? I'm sure I might have asked you this question, but and now that the international break's over, at least this won't become a relevant question until March. But in hindsight, was it the right decision? I know certainly to cite the Norwegian case, Norway refused to let their players play, and so they had to give up the game to Romania. It's a 3-0 walkover, and now there's a, I don't want to go into it too much, but there's a bit of a dispute between Norwegian law and law of all the other players have gone back to, basically as to should they quarantine or not. But regardless, it does feel like the international break has thrown up a new set of issues for club managers on top of, and especially when we think about Premier League, they only have 3 subs. At the moment, we don't know if the 5 sub rule is going to be put in or not, but it does feel like it's brought in more problems than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 sub thing just seems absolutely ridiculous. I know some people were opposing the idea of keeping the 5 sub thing at the beginning of the season. I still don't know why that was the case. In terms of the Nations League was the main point of this international break, especially if you're looking at the European nations. What I don't seem to understand is that the Euros have already been delayed by a year. Assuming that they go ahead in 2021, which I'm not entirely sure they will with COVID still around, but the Nations League would be scheduled for the same time. Do we really need both competitions at the same time? I like the Nations League personally, but do we really need it again at the same time as the European Championships are kicking around? When, as you say, and Ben's absolutely right to say, the physical and mental well-being of players is being hit. Who would have expected, and this is honestly my opinion, this season has been more badly affected by COVID-19 than last season was. The delay of a couple of months with no football is absolutely nothing by comparison to the fixture congestion and massive amounts of injuries on these players. And I said earlier that the injury crisis that so many clubs are facing in the Premier League and beyond is a twofold problem. I was wrong. It's actually fourfold. Number one, they haven't had an adequate summer break for R&R between the 2 seasons, which they'd be used to for the rest of their professional career so far. That can cause, muscular injuries and whatnot down the road. Second is just purely fatigue from playing too many matches. It's regular now for teams, especially in European competitions, to be playing 3 games a week. Then their players are off on international duty playing realistically twice in 10 days, which doesn't help matters at all. Then you've got, the nature of increased injuries as a result of this fixture congestion. And then there's COVID-19 itself. Ben says he can't remember who's injured and who isn't. I can't remember who's isolating and who isn't. I don't know what the COVID protocols are for these different clubs. I don't know how many of my clubs, AS Roma's first team players, are absent, let alone any of these clubs in the Premier League. It's impossible to predict match day lineups. It's impossible to predict results these days. If you don't believe me, look at the state of the Premier League table so far. Do we need to be playing international friendlies at the moment? I like international football. I think it's an important part of the season. I still see, irrespective of what country it is a privilege to play for your country. But do we need so many, is my question. We've had the European Championship qualifiers. I completely understand keeping a couple of international friendlies, but do we need the Nations League as well? Because normally an international break for me is 2 or 3 games. For a lot of these nations, it's been 4 or 5. In exactly the same space of time. The club season and the international season has been affected in exactly the same way, and both of them are going to suffer as a result.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a solution if they could stagger, because obviously it's not just the Euro, it's not just Nations League, but obviously South American clubs and countries rather competing to qualify for the 2022 World Cup at the moment. Asia have had all their games postponed, cancelled, because it is quite difficult to do. So it's certainly it's not an easy problem to solve. But then again, you'd think there were better solutions out there than what we have at the current moment. So yeah, and I just had to check. So the Nations League is set to be played in October. The finals, at least, is set to be played in October. So for Belgium, for Italy, for Spain, and for Portugal, they will compete in October, rather than, I guess, July, as was the last one. Joe, you look.
Yeah, we've got the European Championships a few months earlier.
Yeah.
The transfer window will slam shut, and four of the biggest European footballing nations, 4 nations that have so many players across the major top 5 leagues in Europe and beyond, are going to be completely hamstrung for a bit. That's going to have a massive impact on all of their domestic leagues as well, if you think about it. The influx of players there. Yeah, why just... I'm sorry, I'm really excited that Italy have made the finals, but can we not just bin off the Nations League for 1 year? Prioritise the European Championships.
It would be a glorious summer, wouldn't it not, if Italy were to win both tournaments?
Oh, absolutely, but not if it means, hamstringing the entire league season for the following year, not just in Italy but beyond.
No, of course, I agree. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Look, I get that the World Cup qualifying sort of has to happen because you don't want to approach 2022 and not have anyone not know. Rather, you want to get qualifying out of the way. So that I appreciate needs to happen. But yeah, as you said, the Nations League, doubling up the Nations League and the European Championships does sound like quite the dilemma. But here we are. So it's a difficult one. So I don't really feel like there's a whole lot more to add. So yeah, it's going to be. I mean, Joe, I don't think, because I think I talked to Ben about this last time. You are in favour of the 5 subs as opposed to 3 subs?
Yes, I am.
Okay, fine. I just wanted to check that because obviously, yeah, as you know, it's being used everywhere else but the Premier League. So, yeah. So I guess other news reports that I guess are worth maybe not talking about in depth, but apparently Dani Ceballos and David Luiz had a little training ground fight reported by The Athletic, which Dani Ceballos then replied to say fake on Twitter. So not really sure what's going on there. Not really sure if there's been a little dispute there, but so that was an interesting thing to pick up on. And as well, Steve Bruce calling Miguel Almiron's agent an amateur because apparently Miguel Almiron, Joe, was on the verge of joining Inter Milan or Atletico Madrid before the pandemic.
All I can say in response to that is no, he wasn't. There's no way. Right, systematically, he doesn't fit Atletico Madrid whatsoever. Simeone wouldn't want him. Inter, no. Just no. That would not be happening.
I mean, it's yes, we're talking about Miguel Almiron, who's not quite set the Premier League alight, then earning himself a big move to
Into
to Spain,
Miami.
right?
Into Miami,
Yes.
sure. I'd completely believe that, considering how much he tore up the MLS with Atlanta. But into Milan,
But
no.
No, I don't think so. I reckon it would be. I mean, it would be him and Christian Eriksen sitting on the bench, wouldn't it? Two number 10s who thought they'd have a chance and then would just be outcasted again. So let's go through the Premier League then. As soon as I find my banner, there we go. So week 9 is upon us. So we have, yes, Newcastle lost to Chelsea earlier today. Brighton, it's half time and Brighton still lead Villa. And actually, I'll run through a quick score update. So I'll do that now. So looking at, as I said, Brighton still lead Villa 1-0. Kingsley Coman has equalised Bayern against Werder Bremen. Yep, I'm trying to look for noteworthy results. Real Madrid still lead 1-0 away at Villarreal. Mariano's still got that goal with that second-minute goal, still has them in front. Swansea lead Rotherham 1-0. Stoke lead Huddersfield 3-2 at half-time, which is a 5-goal fest already at Stoke. Millwall lead Cardiff 1-0 thanks to Matt Smith. And Dejan Lovren has scored for Zenit St. Petersburg. He's really started scoring a fair number of goals, and Liverpool fans may feel like they need him right now. And Lazio finished 2-0. They won 2-0 at Crotone. Those are sort of the noteworthy results going on at the moment. So let's bring that graphic back up. So we will talk about Spurs City in a bit, because I feel like that's the game of the weekend, arguably, with Liverpool-Leicester. But Chelsea beating Newcastle. Ben, it's not a surprise that they did it. But nonetheless, they've had some trips to Newcastle that have not gone as well as they'd have liked. They've obviously, Newcastle have been, and as a United fan, you will know Newcastle have made it hard for you guys as well. So getting a win there is nevertheless a pretty, just a good weekend and keeps them in touch with the top of the table.
Yeah, it's a good result for Chelsea, of course, keeping that clean sheet good as well. But I watched the game, and Newcastle did make it very easy for Chelsea. Sat back and obviously conceded quite early on an own goal, which then obviously made it very difficult when they're playing, two banks of 4, and then trying to come out from that with the game plan not going to plan. It was difficult for them, but credit to Chelsea. I think, attacking wise, they look fantastic. I think Ziyech looks incredible. Timo Werner had a very good game again, and I think Tammy Abraham as well. He's been informed, so it's been nice to see Frank Lampard start Timo Werner and Tammy Abraham, with Werner more of a kind of like a more of a narrow kind of wide forward. I think positives for Chelsea there. I think Kante had a really good game actually, which is good to see. Obviously, struggled a bit last year with injuries and a little bit with form, so that was encouraging. And Ben Chilwell as well played really well at left back. It was an own goal, but it was basically Chilwell's movement towards the back post that caused that own goal. So encouraging for Chelsea. It's good, we haven't really spoken of them as title contenders. I don't think I'm fully convinced they necessarily are outright, but who knows with the start of the season. They're getting a lot of results together. They're getting some momentum, and they seem to be gelling a little bit more now. So very encouraging. I think it's very positive feelings for Chelsea fans. I think when their defense is going to be tested more and more when they come up against harder opposition. I think Newcastle starting Joelinton up front, I'd expect a clean sheet from that. But, I think, like I said, positive for Chelsea fans. And they need to just keep applying that pressure, keep building, just focusing on their own run.
Yes. I'm just having a look at the Chelsea lineup, and I'll stick with you with this one. Do you feel like this is as close to what the best Chelsea lineup looks like? Because as far as I can see, obviously, James Zuma, Rudiger, Chilwell, maybe, question mark if Rudiger is the right man to stick with Zuma, but certainly the midfield looks like one of the best midfields, and certainly up front they have they have so many players that they could stick up top. But Ziyech, Abraham, Werner obviously got the job done. Do you feel like this is as close as this was a Chelsea line as close to their best, or do you feel like there's more to come from this Chelsea team?
Yeah, I feel like it definitely is close to their best. But what I think they've got is they can do different combinations. If you're starting up front with two, large centre backs, then maybe you want Tammy Abraham up there to hold the ball up a little bit. But then again, you've got some slow centre backs. I'm sure Timo Werner running those channels will cause a lot more problems. So I think it's what they've got is they do have a lot more squad depth than they had last year. So I think there's a lot of different combinations that can go on now. Obviously, Christian Pulisic wasn't in the side, so he can come on and play left wing. Then allows Werner to go up front. Tammy Abraham drops to the bench. Kaya Bertz can play right mid, although we don't know that. We don't really think that's his best position. So he can play behind instead of Mount. I think they do just have a lot of combinations. If Kante's not playing, they've got Jorginho. Pretty much everywhere other than centre back, I think they've got amazing depth. I was a big fan of Rudiger. I'm not really quite sure what's happened. I think maybe he's lost the manager's confidence a little bit. And maybe that's affected his own. But I'd say probably Thiago Silva does get in there ahead of him to partner Zuma. That partnership, they seem to complement each other quite well. Obviously, with Zuma's speed and power and Thiago Silva's knowledge of the game. But otherwise, yeah, I'd pretty much say that is the basis of Chelsea's lineup. But they've got the ability to move these combinations around, especially going forward, which I think is obviously great to have at their disposal. And I think they're the top scorers in the league. So that very bodes well for their attack and the confidence that they're building.
Yeah, so I think they are actually, and certainly going forward, they've certainly become a very, very threatening side at the moment. They also play Rennes or Rennes at least on Tuesday to kind of preview their Champions League game as well. So, it should be another straightforward 3 points win, you'd think, Joe, against a French opposition on Tuesday, and that would mean a pretty good week for Chelsea if they could get obviously a routine win today, a routine win on Tuesday, and I'll have a look at who they play on the following weekend. But this is sort of the ideal fixtures that you'd want after an international break, isn't it? If you're Frank Lampard.
I was wondering why Chelsea seemed to let off the gas so much this afternoon, but the Champions League game against Rennes on Tuesday, again, fixture congestion, makes an awful lot of sense. As Ben said, Newcastle made it a lot easier than it really needed to be. An uncharacteristic mistake from Federico Fernandez, admittedly unlocked by a surprising bit of play from Ben Chilwell. So I think Newcastle, what was it, one shot on target for the whole game? I mean, that's one more than Newcastle seem to achieve whenever they're chasing games. That stat from last year about them being the most negative team in the Premier League in terms of pressing, yeah, that looked absolutely the case today. Chelsea didn't score an awful lot of goals, mainly because they didn't need to, as opposed to not being able to. Some players coming into the team, obviously we saw Chilwell brought off for Emerson Palmieri, Antonio Rudiger starting. We reckon that one, if not both of those players will depart in January. Don't exactly know where. So it makes sense for Frank Lampard, rest a couple of first team players ahead of a Champions League fixture, and then hopefully get a fee for one or two of these players in January. Again, up the match fitness, get some appearances under their belt, increase the fee just a little bit. So it's just great management all around. Although again, it was pretty damn easy today. Again, good performance by Tammy Abraham. Again, I didn't really see him as a Chelsea starter coming into the season, but as Ben says, he's having a really good run of form. Ziyech looked great before he came off. And although Havertz is out, he's not out for a long time. It seems that Chelsea have been, dare I say it, very lucky at the start of this season. A lot of their Premier League rivals, especially Liverpool, have been massively kiboshed by injuries, especially in one position. Chelsea seem to have gotten away with it pretty much scot-free so far. We'll see how it is in the next couple of months, though.
Yeah, I've just seen that after this week, at least on Sunday next week, they play Spurs at home, which is obviously it's always a game that provides, if not drama, some entertainment and some goals with Lampard versus Mourinho. And then after that, they play Sevilla away. So I guess two big games to follow. So I guess this is sort of the ideal warm-up test, I guess, for Chelsea going forward. I mean, Ben, you mentioned Newcastle made it easy for them. I know they've obviously pulled off some good results. They didn't have Callum Wilson with them, I don't think, for this game. So do we read too much into this result for them, or is it just they were up against a better team today?
I think it's a case of just being up against a better team. I think we earlier on in one of the other shows we praised Newcastle's recruitment, which was fantastic, to be fair to them. So I think a 2-0 loss to Chelsea, it's not really bad. I think it's more the way they went about that loss that would potentially be a problem. But there's blips. Sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you are too scared, and maybe they need more motivation to go out there and properly press a bigger team. So I wouldn't read too much into it for Newcastle. I think it's pretty much an expected result. I don't think the fans will be too let down after that. I think they'll probably bounce back quite quickly. I just think hopefully for them, I think they just need to get Callum Wilson back, because Joelinton cannot play up front, let alone play at the moment. So they really need Callum Wilson back, and then Ryan Fraser as well. Hopefully he can get a bit more involved and they can re-establish their partnership. So I wouldn't read too much into it for Newcastle fans. I think on the whole they'll be okay if they pick up again next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we move on from this, we do have a goal in the Premier League, and that is Aston Villa equalising against Brighton. Ezri Konsa has scored and equalised for Villa, drawing that game level. And who knows where the momentum swung. I've just seen it. Ross Barkley came off the field injured early on into that game, so that's not a good sign. But obviously, with Jack Grealish and John McGinn, the likes of them still on the pitch, they still have enough attacking quality, you would think. Looking at obviously the big game, one of the big games, Spurs City, coming up at 5:30 tonight, or this evening at least. This is a game, Joe, that this is an interesting one, because Spurs obviously made a very good start to this season. City, not so much. But, if we were talking about this fixture before the season, you'd think Man City were the better team over Spurs. So it's a bit of form versus quality, or seemingly at least. And obviously, again, Pep versus Jose, they've got a lot of history as well. What excites you the most about this game?
It's funny that you mentioned form versus quality. It'd be interesting to see if the international break is formed as an effective reset for Manchester City. With a lot of clubs, it seems like these international breaks come at a good or bad time. For Man City, definitely a good time, especially considering that a couple of their Spanish players will have been in that starting 11 for the domination against Germany. Ferran Torres in particular, a hat-trick against Joachim Löw's team. So that's fantastic going into this game. It's honestly, I want to see the midfield rivalry. It's kind of my thing. I've been a huge fan of Pierre-Emile Højbjerg ever since he signed for Tottenham this summer. He's my signing of the season in the Premier League so far, as I believe he was yours as well, Josh. So I'd be interested to see how he does against this Man City team, especially considering against Man United earlier this year, he was very good at closing down their passing game in midfield. Is he going to be able to do that against a Man City team that is more or less built around passing and resting in possession? So interesting to see if that rubs off. Again, defensive quality as well. It's Jose Mourinho in a second season. That team's going to defend well, certainly better than Manchester City do. Perennial failures in terms of defensive quality. So, I don't know how this game is going to go, because this is the COVID-19 affected Premier League season and surprise results seem to come up out of everywhere. But I have more faith in Tottenham Hotspur coming into this game. And I know I criticised them a lot before the beginning of the season. I predicted they'd finish 8th. Just going to say right now, that was a terrible prediction. They're probably going to make top 4 at this rate. But going into this game, I really do think it could swing either way. The fact it's at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium doesn't really mean all that much. But I think Spurs are going to edge this. 1-goal victory.
It will be interesting to see. I mean, I'm just looking at the stats of this game. City, this is the 12 points they have right now. It's the lowest tally after 7 fixtures of a Premier League campaign since when they were managed by Mark Hughes in 2008, 2009. So definitely not a great start for them. They've only scored 10 goals at them this season compared to 27 last season. So certainly, they're not quite there, but as we've sort of mentioned, sort of not, but Raheem Sterling and Sergio Aguero are back in training. They might appear in the next hour, so we'll probably might be on air enough to get team news for that and break that down in more depth. So we will discuss it in more depth. But Ben, I mean, also, actually, before I come to you, I should also say Matt Doherty is self-isolating. He tested positive for COVID-19, so that is a bit of a blow for them as well. Fernandinho also is missing with his stomach problem. So, it's an interesting one, Ben, because, and I don't know, as a United fan, I'd be curious to know which team you're sort of rooting for this one, whether it's Jose, your former manager, or City, your City rivals. So it's an interesting dilemma for you, but as Joe said, this is a really interesting game between a team who obviously started really well and then against a team who, on paper, we pencil in as title contenders, but who haven't really come out of the gate swinging, really, and stumbled. So what should we expect a rejuvenated Man City, as Joe said, or because, as you know, both teams have a lot of international players playing around the world, will this be maybe a slow game as he's thinking?
I think, to echo what Joe says, I think City really need to use this as their advantage. I think this 3 points for City is so important for them. I think, they've been so unconvincing since the start of the season. They need to use this as a reset button. If you haven't written them off already, if they don't win today, they are not winning that title. I can say that right now. They will not, because other teams are just playing so much better than them. That's the thing. It's not like they've been unlucky. They just really, really do look unbelievably unconvincing. I think it's a massive plus for them that Matt Doherty's out, though, because I think Aurier at right back, I'd be tempted to play Tanganga ahead of him if I was Jose Mourinho, just to keep that defensive stability. I think if Raheem Sterling plays and you play Aurier, I cannot see that going too well for them. And then I think also, potentially Fernandinho is a bit of a loss if you need someone a bit more aggressive in there. So it will be an interesting game. I think for Spurs, it's definitely going to be a test of that ruthlessness. We've talked about it before, and they seem to have it more now. They seem to look more of a team that were going to go out there, take their chances, not just have small patches of form and then a surprising shock result and a loss to one of the lower teams. I think this game is a game that Jose Mourinho should thrive off of, and I completely agree with Joe. I think Spurs should edge this, knowing their quality in the start of the season. I think that City back four that looks shaky, I think Harry Kane and Son can cause massive issues there for Manchester City. So I think it's an important game for both sides. I think if Tottenham win, I think they really do confirm their places. We are pushing for this title. We actually are going to go for it this year. And I think if City don't win, I think they are in big trouble. I think they are not winning the Premier League, and I think they've got to establish some form quickly. It'll be interesting. I think it's probably one of the games I'm most excited for. We'll wait and see if it's incredibly anticlimactical and a 0-0, but we'll hopefully not. Hopefully it'll be a classic Pep versus Jose, and the best game of the weekend potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking, and I don't know, maybe we'll have time to do a combined 11, maybe we won't, but I was just thinking, if you guys had to pick a front three comprised of City or Spurs, you could arguably have two from Spurs, because Son and Harry Kane have been in incredible form, versus the third one, it could be Sterling, could be Mahrez, could be Ferran Torres, but arguably you'd have Son and Kane in penciled in at the moment. So it'd be very, unless I'm speaking, am I assuming or wrongly, or am I right on that?
I don't know. Maybe on current form and in on paper squad building to do with age, I would take Kane over Aguero. But if you were asking me down the pub on a Saturday night, who do you think is the better player? My answer would be Aguero, honestly.
This is sort of our Saturday night ritual now, Joe. So you can take it in that context as well. It is an interesting one. Both teams are sort of evenly matched as well. So maybe we'll have time to do a combined 11 at the end. I'll see. But both teams match up pretty well, and that's a pretty exciting game. Obviously, it's not the only game that we have upcoming, and that is United West Brom. But before we do that, there has been a goal at Villa Park, and it has gone the way of Brighton and Hove Albion, because it is Solly March who has banged one in to put Brighton up front, 2-1 up. Apparently it's a long range strike, so it's curled into the top corner. So I imagine Carl Henningway is very excited, our resident Brighton fan. And Brighton lead 2-1. So Villa's side, who are much fancied and who have definitely sung the praises of. I know Ben Weed sung the praises of them last week. Dean Smith especially. They are 2-1 down at Brighton, which is really interesting. I know, I mean, obviously none of us are watching the games, and we can't really provide sort of analysis on the spot. But if Brighton were to win this, Ben, this would be a significant result for them in terms of, I guess, pushing for mid-table and certainly shoring up their place in the Premier League. Yeah, no, it'd be great for them. Great to get some points on the board. I think it's more of a bit pretty much reality check for Villa. Last season, I'd have probably backed Brighton to beat Villa, but just based on current form, you'd think, and the way Villa have been playing, you'd think Villa would blow them out the park. So yeah, I mean, obviously still some time to go, so we'll see what happens. But that's a little bit of a bump in the road for Villa, a little bit of a reality check. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if Jack Grealish is still on that pitch, then anything is possible. I'm hoping you speak that into existence as someone who's captained him and captains Grealish in his fantasy football team. So I really need Jack Grealish to do well, and Ollie Watkins as well. Actually, I'm invested in Villa, but I've also invested in Tariq Lamptey. So my allegiances are torn and all over the place for this game in terms of fantasy football. But anyway, the other game who I need a fantasy football player to do well, and that's Marcus Rashford, is Man United versus West Brom, and that's coming up later this evening. Now, Ben, are you? I've been listening. I was listening to another Man United fan on another podcast earlier, and he was saying how he doesn't know what Man United side turns up nowadays. Whether it's the one that's going to put 4 goals past West Brom or the one that's going to kind of labour to a 1-0 victory. Are you? I'm guessing you're in the same boat. You don't really know which Man United side's going to turn up either. And does this fixture strike you as a potential banana skin result, or are you confident that despite all the sort of whatever United side turns up, you'll be good enough to beat West Brom? I think, if I'm honest, I just don't know what's going to happen. I cannot believe, as a Manchester United fan, I am sitting here nervous for West Brom at home. West Brom at home, and I'm nervous. If that doesn't, I'm not going to go on another rant, but if that doesn't say what's needed to be said, then I don't know what does, because yeah, it's ridiculous. I've actually lost track of what players are out injured as well. So I'm not particularly confident with this game. I think it depends on what Manchester United's gonna turn up, and as we can see, they can reach unbelievable heights. I think they do have the potential to be amazing, but then again, they can reach staggering lows with defending. I think there's been a lot of players out there on the international break. There's been some who've remained there and been training. So I think, it'll be interesting to see what the lineup is, and how many players have slight knocks, how many players who've been held back and didn't go on international duty are going to start. Personally, I really want Donny van de Beek to start. I think he scored in the international break, so I'm hoping he gets a game. But yeah, I don't know what way it's going to go. I'm not going to make a prediction because I don't want to jinx it, and I honestly have no clue. Oh yeah, I didn't ask you guys for predictions on Spurs City, actually, speaking of predictions. So just quickly, I'll say this is going to end in a 1-1 draw. I am as boring as that. Joe, you said 1-0 victory.
1-0 Spurs defender to score.
Right, interesting. Ben?
I'll go 1-0 Spurs as well.
Interesting. Okay. I just feel like this will be a bit of a draw, or just a bit of a post-international break draw. But I mean, you mentioned, United. I'll just quickly run through Rashford. Obviously, he had a bit of a shoulder injury, didn't link up with England this international break, but is expected to be fit to play. Alex Telles could be available from having been with Brazil over the international break, but he is said to be available. Lindelof and Mason Greenwood are in doubt. Whereas West Brom have had a few players test positive for coronavirus, but they have completed in self-isolation. That includes Mateus Pereira, Branislav Ivanovic, and Callum Robinson. So no real major absentees on either side, you'd think. But Joe, this is a big game. I mean, if you're thinking about it, this is a team in the relegation zone traveling to a mid to low team. This one might say this would be a relegation 6-pointer in any other context, but no, this is United versus West Brom.
It's just so insane to think about it, isn't it? That this is, in terms of like interest on, if we were doing Super Saturday as per usual, if they hadn't staggered the kickoff times for more TV money, this would be one of the games that had the least at stake. It was like one of the least interesting games on paper. I mean, so I look at the differences between these two teams and I say that if Manchester United cannot win this game by 3 goals, then they're clearly not a great team. But listening to an actual Manchester United fan who does not have a single clue how they're going to turn up this afternoon, am I right in saying it's at Old Trafford as well? It's not at the Hawthorns. Just wait until it comes across the bottom. Right. Yeah, exactly. Especially in that context. Manchester United have to win for me by at least 3 goals, especially when you consider just how famously awful West Bromwich Albion are at defending in the Premier League under Slaven Bilic. And yeah, I listen to Ben, I listen to other Man United fans, and I look at their results so far this year, and I just would not be willing to put a single penny on the result of this game. If you want a prediction from me, I'm just going to say it now, 5-1 Manchester United. I think this is going to be a case of like the game against Newcastle a few weeks ago. The quality will shine through. But if this game ended up as a 1-1 draw, I'm sure Ben would agree with me here. Yeah, that's expected now.
Yes, apologies. I was having a look at United's potential fixtures because obviously, this is a game we expect you guys to win. But going forward, you play Istanbul on Tuesday, I believe, which obviously, Ben, we analysed to death what happened the last time you guys played Istanbul. So that's a big fixture. And then looking ahead, I mean, you have Southampton away, who have obviously a solid team at the moment. Then PSG at home because of the whole Champions League thing. And West Ham away, who again, West Ham have made a decent-ish start. And then obviously Leipzig to finish off. And then the Manchester derby. So I read off those next 6 games. This feels like a very, granted, this isn't like you're not playing Liverpool or Chelsea or Arsenal, but this still feels like a very important month for United.
Yeah, I think it's a very important month. And I think it's an important month for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. My worry is if they are saying they're going to stick with him, I do not want Pochettino to get snapped up by another club. And I fear that the longer this goes on, that's going to happen. I genuinely believe he wants this job. He sat there on Sky Sports and basically just said his application right there. So, I think he wants this job. And I think Man United, the only positive I can see from coming out and going on a bad run is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer getting sacked. Because, I've sat on the fence. I've said I see both sides, but, I put my foot down and say he is not. It's staggering that he is manager of Manchester United. Manchester United, one of, if not the biggest club in the world, and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is manager. It's not right. And I think, even though he gets the occasional result every now and then, as Manchester United fans, we shouldn't sit here worrying about West Brom and Istanbul. That these should be games where we can basically just play our B team and win. Because, we used to have fear factor. We used to have, all of this talent. We used to be a powerhouse in the Premier League, and now we're almost laughable. And, and that's the thing, it's got to the point now where it's actually extremely depressing to be a Man United fan. And to the point it's got that depressing that I almost just laugh at my own club when we lose these fixtures. Like the goal we conceded against Istanbul. I mean, that if that wasn't comical, what was it? So, I think it's really tough to be a Manchester United fan right now. I could, in a week's time, maybe I'll be sitting here saying, yeah, I'm feeling really confident and really positive. But, then in a month's time, I'll be sitting here saying Ole Gunnar Solskjaer needs to be sacked again. So, it really is just an absolute mess with what's going to happen. But we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, it does feel like, as I said, a pivotal sort of month or so. And Joe, I mean, that Champions League group of PSG, Leipzig, United, Istanbul, it's very evenly poised at the moment. And there's no, and at this stage, there's no margin for error. We're past the halfway stage of the group stage. 3 games to go. There is no margin for error now. And granted, Istanbul could really surprise us and come third, or maybe even challenge the top 2. But assuming they don't, one of PSG, Leipzig, or United are going into the Europa League, which is an unthinkable thing. That if they weren't drawn together, we wouldn't be thinking that.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's unthinkable for Manchester United to be in the Europa League after a Champions League group stage. I mean, I think Ben himself said when the groups were actually drawn that he'd reckon United would drop down into the Europa League, and I was with him. But again, how ridiculous have these results actually gone? Beating PSG away, hardest game in the group, and then losing against a Başakşehir side that can't even get themselves out of the bottom half of the Turkish Super League. So, again, if you ever wanted an example of just what a Jekyll and Hyde team this Manchester United team is, then it's absolutely there. I would not even dare to predict how this group is going to go. For me, Paris Saint-Germain are comfortably the best team in it. But again, they've got their own managerial and defensive issues there. So, yeah, I'm going to say, obviously, Man United to beat Başakşehir here. I feel like on paper that should be a fairly obvious result. But we all know what happened last time. So I do remember, just to close off this, I didn't watch the video because it's ESPN FC, but the quote from Shaka Hislop: "There is no manager in the world who, when he needs a result, gets them as often as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer." If you think about it, every single time it seems like Solskjaer has had an ultimatum: you win this or you get sacked. He's won it. And if this just keeps happening, like Ben says, they are going to miss out on someone like Mauricio Pochettino. Pochettino, there have been so many clubs he could have gone to. The amount of bullets Manchester United have dodged with Pochettino. He could have gone to Barcelona. Nah, he's an Espanyol boy, so he's not going to go there. Juventus, what? They've just signed Andrea Pirlo. So many European giant clubs he could have gone to. He's still available. But that window's not going to be there forever. And I've seen that Sky Sports clip as well. If you ever wanted proof that Man United still have pulling power and that Pochettino wants that job, Ben's right. It's there. And yet knowing that this has happened, Solskjaer will probably pull out a miraculous win and keep himself in the job for another 6 months.
Yeah, it is fascinating to watch as someone who's not a Man United fan. It is fascinating to watch on the outside. And yeah, I mean, Joey, I mean, you mentioned how PSG, we think of the best team on paper, but they lost to Monaco last night, 3-2. With Cesc Fabregas inspired Monaco, who, granted, Monaco are a dominant force in French football, but they're not the dominant force they once were with Fabinho and Jardim, and they've not the team that they once were.
For a few years, they've been. Well, there was a time under Jardim as well that they looked like they were going to get relegated. Again, that's a club that makes absolutely no sense for the last few years after that Champions League semi-final.
They have Niko Kovac at the helm now, and he was very mixed at Bayern Munich. His stay was it was a short-lived tenure. So this PSG side equally are as much Jekyll Hyde as much as Man United are, arguably. And Thomas Tuchel's under pressure at the moment. Really, it's fascinating. So that adding that to a Leipzig side who I think they were spanked by United 5-0. I don't think that's a great indicator of how good they are. And I still give them the benefit of the doubt to make it through. But it's a fascinating group, really. And I think. And I know one site. I mean, I cited it a few weeks ago, but 538, who predicts like the US politics and stuff. They predicted the football as well, and they think PSG are the most likely to finish third. We will wait and see if that holds up. But yeah, I mean, Ben, just to wrap a kind of tie a bow over this. You're still sort of optimistic that they'll get wins over West Brom and Istanbul, right? This should be a routine good week for United.
Yeah, I think exactly that. I think, I do sit here and worry, but I think, deep down, I believe that we should and we will win these games. And I think, I don't think, not even Man United fans, I don't think anyone expects any less of Man United. When you spend that much money and you have those players in that squad, they should be winning no matter who the manager is. But we'll see.
There we go. Just some results that have wrapped up in Germany that I can bring to everyone's attention. Bayern Munich were held by Werder Bremen in the end, 1-1. So that is, yes, Joe, that happened against a Werder Bremen side who haven't had the greatest season so far. Granted, they look much improved on last season, but yes, they have drawn 1-1. Leverkusen beat Arminia Bielefeld 2-1. Gladbach were held 1-1 by Augsburg, which is an interesting result. Ryan Sessegnon's goal was not enough to help Hoffenheim beat Stuttgart as that finished 3-3, with Kempf scoring a 93rd minute equaliser for the visitors. Looking ahead, Atalanta will kick off against Spezia in half an hour's time. So
I've just seen the lineups as well. Interesting.
Yes, and actually we should. In a moment I will check the City Spurs line, so that should be coming out soon. Looking at the Championship, Bristol City lead Derby County 1-0. Obviously, Derby County managed by Wayne Rooney and Liam Rossignol. Philip Koku was let go, Joe, for context. So Bristol City lead 1-0, so not a great start for Wayne Rooney's managerial aspirations. Luton drawing against Blackburn Rovers. Timo Pukki has scored for Norwich against Middlesbrough. Millwall and Cardiff are drawing 1-1. Preston lead Sheffield Wednesday 1-0. QPR drawing 1-1 with Watford. And Stoke lead Huddersfield 4-3. 4-3 is quite the scoreline at Stoke at the moment. So yeah, those are results going on as of now. So let's look at tomorrow, and I feel like tomorrow the standout fixtures Liverpool-Leicester. Obviously Leicester, who before this weekend led the table. Liverpool, obviously last year's champions, have had a very decent start given how City have not had a great start, United have not a great start. Liverpool, by contrast, have had a decent start, but as we know, they are injury hit and injury riddled at the moment. Let me just run through who's out. So Henderson is out with a groin injury. Mo Salah is self-isolating because he tested positive for coronavirus. Then we have Alexander-Arnold, Gomez, and Van Dijk are all absent. Fabinho, Thiago, and Oxlade-Chamberlain are doubts at the moment. So this, and I know Andy Robertson had a slight groin strain. I think he'll be fine, but again, it's very hard to tell. He is the captain of Scotland, played a huge part for Scotland over the last 2 weeks, so Klopp may give him a rest or may not. So Ben and I talked about this last week. So Joe, just to hear your thoughts on granted, their opponents Leicester have not had it easy with injuries either. Indeed, he's been out. Ricardo Pereira's obviously been out long term. Johnny Evans has been in and out as well. So granted, Liverpool aren't the only team with injuries, but having said that, they have been decimated recently, and this should be a fascinating test for Jurgen Klopp, but also Brendan Rodgers against his former team, and he'll no doubt see this game as one that is the Liverpool side there for the taking on Sunday.
It's one of those games that I would say is box office, COVID-19 or not. If going into this fixture last season, I would have been incredibly excited for Liverpool versus Leicester. It's funny you say that, two teams in relatively similar circumstances. One team that just don't have a particularly deep squad in Leicester City versus one that have a relatively deep side that has ultimately been cut short by COVID and injuries in Liverpool. Going into the game, I do believe Liverpool will win this, simply because I think that on paper they're a better team, and even though Mohamed Salah isn't there, you've got Diogo Jota, who has made your Raw Sport team of the season so far, and rightfully so. So again, I think Liverpool have just about enough. It just, you asked me for my honest response when these Liverpool injuries were coming in, especially the potential season-ending injuries to Van Dijk and Gomez, to which my response was and still is, welcome to the club. Welcome to having an injury crisis. This is a regular occurrence for some of us. But again, it's further to what I've been saying all year long about the increased risk of injury and fatigue in this COVID-19 affected season. In terms of the tactical setup, I don't know how Brendan Rodgers is going to line up against his former side, because I feel like even with Liverpool there for the taking, defensively speaking, the moment you leave yourself open against Liverpool, Mohamed Salah or not, you leave yourself open to goals, and multiple goals at that. I completely agree. Liverpool have had a good start to the season. It's just that result against Aston Villa, what that has done to their goal difference, if nothing else, is 16 goals conceded already. If it sounds like I don't want to give a prediction or talk about the game in depth, it's because I genuinely can't. This is one of those games that I will try to cover as much as I can, because I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. All I can say is, for both sides, I hope in the wake of an international break that we don't see another major injury coming out of this game, because one more first team injury to either one of those sides, especially if it's a long-term one, could seriously affect their season. I always say, if you're seriously affected by one injury in your team, then you're not a great football team. If 3 or 4 of your first team players are out, it's a completely different story.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the blistering pace Liverpool have. We obviously know all about Jamie Vardy's pace, and obviously facing a depleted Liverpool backline, he's expected to cause them problems. So, Ben, what excites you about this game? What are you looking forward to for this game? Because let's face it, both teams have pretty quality midfields at their best. Obviously, very pacey, quick front attacks, and obviously defenses that manage to at least Liverpool last year were characteristically not. I mean, they were okay defensively. In Leicester, we've seen they can be good defensively, but we've also seen they can lose to West Ham defensively as well. So, what are you most looking forward to from this game?
I think to echo what Joe said, it's just a really tough one to call. I think when I was looking at it, I was thinking, okay, Harvey Barnes and Jamie Vardy didn't go on international duty, so they're going to be fresh and coming up against, a Liverpool back four that we have no idea what it's going to look like. I think that can definitely cause a threat. So I think that'll be interesting. I think obviously just looking at the lineup about what they're going to do at the back, obviously Andy Robertson has played centre back a couple of times in his career, but potentially they'll go with one of the kids, although I think one of them's injured as well. So really don't know what's going to happen. I think what a time to have James Milner, can play anywhere, really, and do a job. So that's the only maybe plus that they have him in the squad. But still, as much as he's James Milner, he still can't play everywhere. So it's, very difficult for Liverpool. I think they're basically just going to have to revert to pre-Van Dijk days of let's just score more of the opposition. I completely agree with Joe on the fact that, you don't have Mohamed Salah, but Diogo Jota, Mane and, Roberto Firmino will still happily be probably the best attack in the league. So, we'll wait and see what happens there. But, it's going to be a very interesting game. I feel like Leicester have the capacity to cause Liverpool problems and win the game. Just looking at that defence, even if it's from a mental, psychological point of view, that I can't imagine that whoever's starting in that back four will feel overly confident just knowing that there's this many players out from that back four. So, Leicester could capitalise on that, especially with one of the league's most experienced strikers. So I don't know. I fancy Leicester definitely being able to score some goals, but then again, Liverpool are capable of scoring more. So it's going to be a really interesting game. I thoroughly enjoy watching it, but just like Joe said, impossible to call.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be. It's again, it's sort of the same thing with Spurs City, isn't it? It's a team in really good form against a team that on paper have better quality. So it is that interesting sort of dilemma again. But we'll see what sort of Liverpool team kind of come out. I imagine, like Ben, I imagine you're sort of right there. I do think Robertson they will move him to the centre back, or they have Tsimikas, the Greek international. I don't know if he's fit or not, but he can obviously play left back and allow Robinson to come in centre back. You've obviously Fabinho might be fit, so that might be a plus to have him alongside, be it Nat Phillips or Reece Williams, whoever they choose. Nico Williams available as well, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they do against Leicester. Unlike the two of you, I'm going to say this is going to be 1-1. I'm going to go a draw again for this one.
What, do you
anyone
want
else
us to make
wants.
predictions as well?
Well, do you want to jump on the ledger with me? And
Right, okay. This game has got goal fest written all over it. Two teams that have, defenses depleted, focused on attacking football, as indeed basically every other team in England seems to do these days. However, this season's been affected by COVID-19, so I'm going to say it's going to be 0-0.
Interesting.
Because if I get that right, I will look like a genius.
Because you mentioned goal fest at the start to preface your comments, and then went 0-0.
If I get that right, I will look like an absolute genius. If I get it wrong, obviously, it's just another wrong prediction to add to all the ones I've done so far this season.
Yeah, we've racked up a fair few. Ben, any thoughts about what the scoreline could be for this game?
Just to be different, I'll go with 4-3 Liverpool.
Oh wow, okay, yeah, that's the complete opposite. So this is gonna be fun. We'll see who's closer. Obviously, the Liverpool, again with the Champions League busy week, they play Atalanta as well on Wednesday night at home. Joe, I don't know if we heard from you this. Were you surprised that Liverpool smacked Atalanta 5-0 away, and how realistic is that to happen again come Wednesday?
Yeah, something, no fans in the stadium, something. I've not seen anything of that game, Josh, so I couldn't even tell you anything about it. I think I was at work when it was on, so yeah, I couldn't even tell you who the goal scorers were. All I know is that despite former station manager Luke Edwards was saying that Papu Gomez looks amazing whenever he sees him play. He was my Serie A player of the year for last year, Atalanta captain. But it's difficult to read too much into that when they were 5-0 down with some distance to go in the game. So I honestly could not call this one. I feel like if Liverpool let off the gas a little bit against Leicester, as I'm kind of predicting they will, they can go in and spank Atalanta again. But honestly, Josh, that game's a freak result.
Yeah, it is.
But then again, like last Champions League season, the first half of the group, Atalanta don't think they won a single game. They were amazing in the second half. So maybe that'll happen again. Honestly, I don't know. But they're another team that have been massively hit by injuries because their first team squad is very, very thin. Obviously, they've got a tiny wage bill. Yeah, the long and short of it is, Josh, I've got absolutely no idea what happened in Bergamo that weekend. Sorry, that night. And I don't know what's going to happen at Anfield either.
Yeah, I seem to recall City smacked them 5-1 this time last year as well. So, amazing going forward. Defensively, we're just ruthlessly caught out time and time again, I guess, on the break. But this is, Liverpool haven't had really any issues in terms of the Champions League, Ben. When you look at it, they beat Ajax, obviously 1-0 away. They beat Midtjylland at home. Then they beat Atalanta 5-0. So, again, I guess in the spot that United wish they would be, in the spot where you've won all three games, and obviously Liverpool favourites now to kind of close that out, and obviously a win against Atalanta would push them one step closer towards qualification for the last 16.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all expected Liverpool to get through and breeze the group, and they've done that. So that's the thing. However you get the result, they seem to get the result, and that's the difference in the last few years. They're now able to play a poor game and still get a result, and also just maintain that high level of performance and domination. So yeah, that whilst they have these defensive troubles, I think their attack is just that strong that they can just get through it. I think from a neutral point of view, I more look at this injury crisis as right. This is a test for Jurgen Klopp. I say test. It's extremely difficult. But this is where we're going to find out how good of a manager he is, and not just in terms of tactics. I think in terms of man management, he needs to be incredibly selective about when he plays those kids. Because if those kids come in and have one bad game and concede 4 goals, their confidence is probably not for the next 5 months. So it tests the character of Jurgen Klopp and his man management, and it also tests the character of those players. So yeah, that's how I look at it from a neutral perspective, and how interesting it's going to be. But yeah, no doubts about them qualifying for the Champions League.
Yeah, absolutely. And it would be a bit of a collapse if they weren't to get through. Just quickly looking at all the other games for this weekend, do any of the remaining ones we haven't talked about catch your eye? Off the bat, Leeds Arsenal looks interesting. We've seen Leeds get smacked by Crystal Palace, but we've also seen Leeds perform really well against the bigger teams. So I don't know. To me, that one looks pretty good. But Joe, any of those games stand out to you?
Any games in the Premier League this weekend? Let me just have a look. Not really, no. How many goals can Everton put past Fulham is a fairly open question. But aside from that, yeah, I think most of the interesting games we've already talked about for this weekend.
All right, Ben, any thoughts on these games?
Yeah, no, I agree with Joe. I think Leeds Arsenal will be interesting to see what happens. I think that could go either way. I mean, how many times have we said that on this show? That could go either way. So it's impossible to call. Wolves, Southampton, maybe a very high pressing team against more of a defensive team. But still, nothing too exciting. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say that, Tariq Lamptey's been sent off for Brighton, but it is still 2-1 Brighton in the 92nd minute. So it does look like a 10-man Brighton is going to win. More shame for my fantasy team because I have Tariq Lamptey, so now that's quite annoying. But anyways, it is what it is. That is the nature of the Premier League. So, I mean, going through some of the Champions League games, these are the Tuesday games. Of the ones we haven't talked about, I think these are really straightforward looking at them. I don't know if anyone disagrees, but Barca to play Dinamo Kiev, they should beat that. Juventus should beat Ferencváros. Is that how you pronounce it, Joe? Ferencváros?
Mate, I don't want to get it wrong. I think it's Ferencváros or Ferencváros, something like that.
Okay, thank you. And then Dortmund should beat Bruges, Lazio, Zenit. So I feel like a lot of these games are pretty one-sided. If you look ahead on Wednesday, I mean, there are some pretty interesting ones. Inter Real Madrid, a big one. Look on the board. Bayern Munich, RB Salzburg, because we saw what happened last time, 6-2 Bayern. So that could be a goal fest. So some interesting games. I mean, Joe, do you have any thoughts on the Champions League games coming up? Or again, do they all look pretty one-sided, bar the Inter Real Madrid game, I guess? But
Inter versus Real, I just think Real Madrid are going to win because Inter seem to have one hell of a lot of problems opening up the season, despite on paper having a very deep, effective squad. I think they're only eighth in Serie A at the moment, so I don't know what's going to happen there. The only other game that interests me is Lazio versus Zenit, not because I'm going to be watching it, not because I like either of the teams, because I most definitely don't. It's because of the stories off the pitch that Lazio could well be excluded from Serie A for breaching for alleged breaches of COVID-19 protocols. Will that have an impact on their Champions League campaign as well? I really don't know. But that group as well is a bit of a mess. I think I said that Dortmund and Bruges would be the teams going through. At the moment, that still looks very possible.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that group is also kind of up in the air, as is Group H. So yeah, it should be interesting stuff. I know we have the team news for Tottenham City, so let's just get those up very briefly. Let's start with the home side. Let's start with Tottenham. Lloris in goal, as Ben said, or Sergio Aurier gets to start at right back. Toby Alderweireld and Eric Dyer as your centre back pairing. Reguilon on the left, and then midfield three, I suppose, of Højbjerg, Sissoko, and Ndombele, and then Bergwijn, Son, and Kane. Gareth Bale is on the bench. So anyone got any thoughts on this off the bat? No? I mean, this is pretty template stuff from Spurs, I guess.
Maybe a rookie question to ask. Bergwijn on the right, Son on the left, or the other way around?
I'm going to assume it is right to left.
Okay. I'm just trying to think, like, I mean, I agree with Ndombele starting. He's done really well recently, but I'm trying to think what his role is going to be in this game in particular, because at least on paper, that is a very negative midfield. It's a very Mourinho midfield. But what's that going to do against Man City's midfield?
I mean, I don't know. Ben, do you have any thoughts on this team, looking at it?
The only thing that strikes me about that midfield is that's very athletic midfield.
Yeah.
Which maybe potentially, I look at even Sissoko, I'd probably a more defensive-minded player, but when he's running forward with the ball, he is a powerful runner, just like Ndombele. So that's the only thing. That back four, I know they defend well, but Dyer and Aurier.
I
don't think they could do anything else, but I'd be a little bit, if I was Ferran Torres, I'd be eyeing that up.
There's definitely no weakness. Yeah.
I look at that back four. Maybe I'm talking nonsense here. The player I trust most defensively is Reguilon, and that's mostly based off last year. The fact that Mourinho is able to get that Tottenham defensive personnel defending as well as he does is just proof of how, at least in second seasons, he's still one of the best managers going. Love him or hate him.
Let's have a look at the the City lineup in contrast. I feel like, just give me one moment as I get that up. There we go. So by contrast, Ederson goal, Walker, Diaz, Laporte, and Cancelo as your back four. Rodrigo, I guess, is your holding midfielder with De Bruyne as well. I guess it's a double pivot of sorts. And then Mahrez, Bernardo Silva, Ferran Torres, and then Gabriel Jesus up front. So Aguero on the bench, Sterling on the bench, Foden on the bench as well. So again, I'm not hugely surprised by this team. It's very interesting that Raheem Sterling is only fit enough for the bench, I guess, because I wasn't sure if he was, because he obviously didn't feature for England, so I thought he'd have a bit of a chance, but clearly not. But any thoughts on this one? I'm quite interested to see how De Bruyne does in the more withdrawn role, I guess.
I've got two takes in response to that. Number one, the midfield could not be more different in how they're setting up. Very, very technical, almost wing-ready midfield that basically all of them in Manchester City's lineup are, versus, as Ben says, the very athletic focus of, with the possible exception of Højbjerg, very athletic focus of Tottenham. My second take, I cannot believe how ugly Manchester City's match lineup presentations are. That looks like something I would prepare for like a year 7 school sports day. That is hideous.
Can I just say, at least they lay it out like that. Like the ones that are videos, just like, I don't need to watch a video to find out the team. I'm like, just give me the graphic.
No positions, no squad numbers, the photos at the side just why. Obnoxious sponsor towards the top left. Your club has a very clear established colour scheme as well, of that sort of aquamarine sky blue. Why is it then black and white for the lineup down the middle? Just even down to the fact, if you look at the subs, you haven't, like, Aguero is not an extreme option. Like, you've got Stefan starting it in goal, that makes sense. But then you've got Foden and Garcia, more advanced than Aguero, makes no sense.
I'm sorry,
why
different?
They organise that? It's not even alphabetical.
How different? How much different is it to the Tottenham lineup we just saw? Because that one's presented by William Hill. Okay. Look. At least they give it to you, and they don't make you watch a video to find out the lineup. Okay, because that I find really annoying. It's like just give us the lineup. And yes, I agree that the lack of squad numbers and like lineup position isn't great, but I've seen worse. So anyway, Ben, any more serious takes on this Man City lineup?
I think pretty much almost what you'd expect. Actually, from both teams, I'm quite excited to see how the substitutions go. I think with Tottenham, we've got obviously Bale and Lucas on the bench who could potentially come on, and then obviously City here with Sterling, Aguero, and Foden. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the bench. Also, I think I just picked up on a point about Bergwijn playing as well. That adds to athletic nature. I think Lucas is actually very defensively well proven as a winger, but he's still gone with Bergwijn. So again, I feel there's definitely an athletic kind of idea going there for Jose Mourinho in that selection. So yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much all I take from that. But that City lineup pretty much just as what I expected.
Yeah, I think both sides have put out sort of their best. I mean, these are the teams we sort of expected to see, so it's not a huge surprise, and we will see what happens going forward. I did want to get up. First of all, I just want to shout out the fact that the Leon women's team had their 4-year unbeaten streak ended last night by PSG women's side winning 1-0. So I did want to give that some shine because that is, I mean, one, it's a phenomenal thing to go unbeaten in 4 years, but yeah, for PSG to undo that, that is huge. And obviously, Erling Haaland won the Golden Boy last night as well, or at least he is the Golden Boy of 2021. Joe, are we surprised by that? Is he one of the most exciting under 21 players in the world at the moment?
I mean, when you consider the season he's just had, both for RB Salzburg and for Borussia Dortmund, especially in the Champions League as well, and just what an obsession people still have with strikers as opposed to any other position, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. Do you have the players that finished second and third, etc. at the moment? Because I didn't know the Golden Boy had been done.
I'm working on it. I am working on it. But Ben, I mean, again, it's not given the miraculous kind of 2019 season he's had as well.
Yeah, no, I think 100% deserved. I don't think anyone can really argue against it. Looking at the list, I am shocked that Mason Greenwood is not in the top 10. I'm really do not understand.
So I have
what's happened there.
I have Ansu Fati finished second, Alphonso Davies finished third, Jadon Sancho was fourth, and Eduardo Camavinga was fifth. That's the top 5 I see. I can't find a more definitive thing other than that.
There's a lot of recency bias there.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
I'm having a look to see if there are any if they are ranked or so. I might have something. Yep, Kulusevski finished 6th. Foden finished 7th. Szoboszlai finished 8th. Saka 9th, and Vinicius 10th. Let me share that.
Having seen a lot of the nominees, there are some suspect picks in there. Like,
there we go.
Let's have a look. Yeah, Bukayo Saka should be nowhere near the top 10, and considering some of the other options that got nominated. Why is Camavinga ahead of Kulusevski? Fati's way too high. I mean, he's been brilliant at the start of the season, but that's more due to like injuries again than anything else. Szoboszlai, good. Maybe should be a little bit higher. Vinicius has been very on and off. I don't even know if he should be in the top 10. Yeah, that's odd. It always is, to be fair, Golden Boy. But
I mean, this is. I mean, we could put together our own list at some point in the next few weeks to rival the Golden Boy. I have the 20-man shortlist. So here is the shortlist. In the next few weeks or so, I'm sure we could put together a list that we feel is more fitting, I guess, of the award. But here we go. So here are the Premier League nominees. So I guess Hudson-Odoi did not make the top 20. Top 10 rather. Greenwood did not. Fabio Silva did not either, although we've not seen a whole lot of him at Wolves, admittedly. Going to La Liga. Let me know if I'm going too quickly, by the way. Serginho Dest made the list. Rodrigo made the list as well. The Bundesliga ones, all 3 made it, so no real omissions there. In terms of Ligue 1, we had Jonathan David and Michel Bakker also on the list for Ligue 1. And then Tonali was also on the list as well for Serie A. He
should definitely be in the top 10. And
then Gravenberch, who is a really exciting player for Ajax, and Szoboszlai. So there you go. Those are the 20 that made it. So I don't know. I mean, we can put together our own list. We've just Ben and I did the Premier League way too early awards. I feel like next week maybe, or in 2 weeks' time, we could put together a Golden Boy sort of list. And I'm sure Joe, you'd have your thoughts. So maybe that's an idea for future segments. Because I'm sure. I'm guessing we don't disagree with Haaland finishing top. I think it's the rest of the list. I'm guessing that we have. No, I wouldn't say issues with, but
looking through the nominees, because I covered the Golden Boy quite a lot with Raw Sport last year, the nominee list looks a lot weaker this year. But last year, I would go down to like 15th, 16th on the list and think, wow, what an amazing player. This year, really not the case. I mean, I don't disagree with too many of the nominees necessarily, but if you were putting together a top 10, I was saying, they shouldn't be anywhere near the top 10 when we're going through them. Maybe they should be.
We will. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I feel like we should definitely. I feel like our list would be slightly different, so that's an idea for a future show or not. But I think we're gonna leave it there. Obviously, obviously another exciting week of club football. Ben, what are you? I'm guessing you're gonna be watching United West Brom tonight. Let us know, what are you excited to watch this weekend?
Yeah. Obviously, I think the two games coming up now, I'll probably do a bit of a back-to-back to watch Spurs v City and then United v West Brom. See how that goes, and to see if Man City get the win and we don't, that will probably ruin the weekend. But I don't know. Hopefully, things go my way.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you'll be watching the Istanbul game as well on Tuesday night. So. Plenty of football. I mean, Joe, you work night shifts, so you're probably not going to see most of these games. But if you had to pick one to watch highlights of, is there any that stand out to you?
There's only one game I care about this weekend, and it is the only game where I basically am cheering on both teams at once. The Derby della Spagnoli kicks off at 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. Roma versus Parma.
Oh, boy.
I hope it's a good show.
Oh boy, that's an exciting one. For myself, I am probably going to switch around and watch both Bundesliga games tonight. Excited to see if Yusufa Moukoko gets any action for Dortmund tonight. Obviously, 16-year-old, turned 16 this week and is already into the matchday squad because you're not allowed to have anyone under 16. So we'll be very interested to see if he gets any game time. Should be a lot of games to keep track of, so we'll see what happens. But that will do it for Raw Sport Quaran-Stream. My thanks go out to Ben Parkinson for joining me, for Joe Spagnoli as well as always. We'll be back the next week with obviously Raw Sport interview, and then the Quaran-Stream as well. We'll have obviously Champions League to look back on, some Premier League to look back on, some to look forward to. The same shtick as usual, and maybe we'll have time to do some Golden Boy stuff, or we'll definitely fit it in at some point in the time. So until then, thank you for watching, and we will see you next week.